Life really is made up of different seasons that come and go. So there are those phases where we are just thriving and feeling so happy and excited. Other times we are just calm and at peace. Other times we might feel a bit low or maybe something in between. It all really just comes and goes. But then there are those phases where we are really down bad. For whatever reason, we have hit a very, very low. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I try my best to focus a lot on the positives on this podcast and how to create more good times because I think there is so much to celebrate about life. But today I wanted to switch it up a bit and, as I said, talk about these low phases in life. More specifically, I wanted to go back to a phase in my life that was one of the lowest of the lows that I've personally experienced. And I wanted to share some things that I would now do differently if I were to ever go through something like that again. I find these really helpful tools when it comes to navigating these times in life when we might feel very hopeless, especially. And I hope that this resonates with anyone who has felt or is feeling the same things that I felt during that time. As always, if you enjoy my content, please feel free to support it in some way, such as liking, commenting, subscribing, or leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your support really helps for me to continue to create these episodes. Chapter 1: Understanding Emotions. In the first part of this episode, I wanted to share a tool with you guys that I think can be really, really helpful when it comes to dealing with this feeling of hopelessness, because from my experience, when you are stuck in such a low, one of the hardest parts is when you start to become so consumed by your emotions and whatever you are experiencing around you that becomes all you see now. So you almost forget that this is not how you've always felt. Maybe you can't even remember the times in your life where you didn't feel like this. And so in that, you also start to think that this is how you're going to feel forever now, because whatever you're experiencing is just so consuming, it becomes all you see. And that's obviously a very hopeless feeling to experience. I was recently attending like a 10-week course where we were learning about mental health and how to understand your emotions and self-empowerment. And in one of the classes, we learned this tool. And when I first saw it, I just thought, oh my God, I wish I would have known about this back then when I was really struggling, because I think it would have helped me a lot. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. It's called The Map of Consciousness, created by David R. Hawkins. And in simple terms, it's basically a scale which lists really the main, most common emotions that we experience as humans, but it goes from lowest, so the ones that we experience as really negative emotions, and then up to the highest, so the ones that we experience as very positive emotions. So if we look at this scale, I have it in front of me right now, we can see that at the bottom we have emotions like shame, apathy, or grief, and then you have the matching view on life, which would be miserable, hopeless, tragic, which are the ones that are really at the bottom. And then we move a little bit higher, we have emotions like anger or pride. Then we go a little bit higher, we have emotions like courage or willingness, where the view on life would be feasible or hopeful. And then at the top we have emotions such as love, joy, peace, where the view on life is things like meaningful or even perfect. So it's kind of like the whole spectrum of emotions that we experience as humans, but really going from lowest, so the ones that we feel very negative, to the highest, the ones that we experience as very positive. The reason why I found this scale so eye-opening is because, as we talked about in the beginning, I really think one of the hardest parts about being stuck in such a low is when you stop seeing a way out. Like you just get stuck where you are, and then that becomes all you see. And the mind starts to think very black and white. And in that moment, it's like black, the lights are turned off. But when we completely shift our perspective and we start to view our emotions as something that we experience on a scale rather than something that's so black and white, I think it can really shift this feeling of hopelessness, because then you can say, okay, even if right now I don't manage to get to the top of feeling great immediately, maybe I can just take one next step and move up one emotion on the scale. So as an example, maybe right now I'm in the emotion of apathy, which feels very hopeless. It's a state of indifference, I guess, which was where I was a lot during that time. Can I get up to grief or to fear, which will push me to at least face the emotion I'm experiencing, which is the first step to moving out of apathy? And then can I maybe move up to anger even, and then slowly make my way back up the scale? Or if I don't manage that even, at least I can become aware of the fact that there is a way out, because I think that's always the first most important thing to remember, that there is a way out, because that is always the case, even if we don't always feel that way. If I would have to explain in an analogy what these really low lows have felt like for me personally, I would say, imagine you wake up in the forest in the middle of the night, and it's a really dark and scary place, but also you have no idea how you got there, and you can't really remember where you were before this, and you also have no idea how to get out of there again, because whatever you are experiencing is just such a scary or painful or consuming feeling that just becomes all you are able to see in that moment. And that's obviously a very hopeless feeling. And I'm sure if you are watching this video in the first place, many of you can probably relate to that feeling. But this is where this scale becomes such a game changer, because when we shift our perspective and we start to view our emotions as something that we experience on a scale and not something that is so black and white, either it's bad or it's good, then we can say, okay, I am in this forest right now, and it's in the middle of the night and it's really scary, but at least I know the road I must have driven to get there. There must have been enough things that happened that took me from this emotion to that emotion to that emotion until I arrived where I am. Meaning I remember and become aware of the fact that even though, yes, this moment in this forest right now is scary and those feelings are true and valid because I'm currently actually here, at the same time, I know now that this is not where I've always been, and this is not where I'm going to continue to be forever, which I think really brings back this feeling of hope and being able to hold a wider perspective, which we often tend to lose in these lower phases. And that just makes it all so much more painful than it actually needs to be. Chapter 2, staying open to life. If I could go back to that past version of me who was really stuck in the depths of that low and really, really struggling, and I would be able to tell her one piece of advice, one thing to help her make sense of what was going on around her, I would say, don't believe the lies that your mind and your thoughts are telling you. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think this is probably also the biggest thing that I learned during that phase of my life, that our human mind and our human psychology is really very interesting, because whatever we experience, we're always trying to make sense of things. So it's never, oh, this happened. It's always, oh, this happened and that means XYZ. And at times that's good because we have the ability to make sense of things. But in other times, especially in these low phases, it's not always great, because especially then these interpretations that our mind makes can often be very untrue, very harmful, and also very dangerous. But in that moment, we can't see it because we're so stuck in that low. And so we really start to believe the lies that our mind and our thoughts are telling us. So, for example, let's say someone who you really cared about, someone who meant a lot to you, ends up leaving you. Like that person just walks out of your life. And that is just such a painful or confusing experience that it ends up spiraling you into such a low. Now, in that moment, your brain is probably not going to go in and say, okay, this happened and now I'm in pain. It's going to go in and say, this happened, now I'm in pain, and that means XYZ. And so in that kind of an example of someone who you care about leaving you, it might go in and say, okay, this happened, now I'm in pain, and this means that nobody loves me. This means that nobody cares about me. This means that I don't matter. This means that nobody will ever love me again. This means that life is not worth it. This means that I'm worth less. Like all of these stories, and it just takes us lower and lower and lower, and everything becomes so much more painful, even though none of those stories that our mind is telling us might actually even be true, but now we believe them to be true. So the pain of what we are experiencing and what we are going through is always valid and true, but the meaning or the interpretation that our mind might make from that event is not automatically always true. And I think that's a really important difference to understand and remember, because those interpretations and meanings that our mind makes are based on so many things. It's based on our past and what people have told us and what we have already experienced and what we have seen other people experience and all of these things. And so it's very messy and it's very complicated, but it's definitely one thing for sure, not always based in the truth of who we are and what we truly have to offer and what life truly has to offer for us. From my experience, one of the biggest things that can really help with not believing the lies that your mind is telling you when you are stuck in such a low, or just generally in life really, is to continue to stay open to life and growth and different perspectives. So continue to have conversations with people, continue to read books, continue to listen to podcasts, continue to grow, continue to exchange with people, even if it's not always easy. I know it's not. There's a reason why these lows are so difficult to get out of, but that openness to life and different perspectives is what will make sure that we continue to question and then also potentially not believe those lies that our mind is telling us. So that person that you open up to and have a conversation with and they end up listening to you might take your mind from nobody cares about me to wait, actually people do care about me. Or that book that you read of someone sharing their own experience of them going through something similar that you went through might take your mind from I'm alone in this to wait, actually I'm not alone in this. Or that random experience that you say yes to because you continue to stay open to life and it ends up being amazing might take your mind to my life is not worth it to wait, actually my life really is worth experiencing. Meanwhile, when we are not aware of this, which I was personally not aware of this when I was going through my low phase, I think then it's really easy to get to a point where you just start shutting everyone and everything out because you think, why even stay open to life and different perspectives and people when these stories that my mind is telling me are anyway true, and these stories are telling me that nobody cares about me or my life is not worth it or whatever it is. And that's where, for me personally, from my experience, my journey of just being stuck in that low and not being able to get out of it to slowly moving out of it again really started when I opened myself up to life again, because that's when life was able to show me things that made me question these stories that I was holding on to, because these stories were so shitty. They were what was keeping me down there. And so I had to open myself up again for life to show me things that made me question those stories. That was really the first step to moving out of that low. All right, everyone, that is all I wanted to share for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm so looking forward to connecting with you in my next episode.